The Vorthak dreadnought Silverspine hung in the void, like a blade poised to strike, its gunmetal hull pulsing with the eerie silver-purple glow of its plasma cores. Commander Vorgul stood motionless on the observation deck, his chitinous fingers clasped behind his back, watching the human vessel approach. It was small, pathetically so, a mere frigate by Vorthak standards. Its design was blocky, inelegant, lacking the sleek, weaponized contours of true warships. Its hull bore the scars of countless engagements, pitted and scorched from battles fought in some distant, irrelevant corner of the galaxy. Vorgul's mandibles twitched in amusement. This was what the Galactic Council had warned them about. This was the species that had clawed its way from a death world, defying all odds. Scan complete. Commander, Gromnock rasped from the tactical station, his voice a dry rattle of amusement. Primitive fusion drives, no energy shielding. Armor composition suggests pre-plasma metallurgy. Their weapons are, he paused, mandibles clicking in disbelief, chemical, propellant kinetics, ballistics. Vorgul exhaled through his ventral vents, the sound a low, dismissive hiss. Ballistics, the weaponry of barbarians. The Council had spun tales of human resilience, of their terrifying adaptability. Yet here they were, offering tribute like any other broken species. The human ship hailed them. A face appeared on the view screen. A human female. Her skin pale from years of void exposure, her dark eyes sharp despite the deference in her tone. "Commander Vorgul," she said, her words translated smoothly by the ship's linguist, Core. "I am Major Rebecca Coombs of the Terran Defense Accord. We come bearing gifts, in hopes of peaceful dialogue." Vorgul studied her. The humans had no crest, no spines, no natural armor, just soft flesh stretched over brittle bones. And yet, something in her gaze unsettled him. A stillness, a patience. "Gifts," he echoed, his voice a deep, resonant growl. Coombs nodded. "Artifacts of our culture, technology, knowledge." She gestured off. Screen and a cargo drone slid into view, carrying a sealed container. A gesture of goodwill. Vorgul's claws flexed. It was a familiar dance, the weak offering trinkets to the strong, hoping to buy mercy. The Vorthak had seen it 1,000 times before. "Bring it aboard," he commanded. The container was unremarkable, a simple alloy box, its surface unadorned. Gromnock circled it, his scanner humming as it dissected the contents. No energy signatures, no detectable weapons. He tapped a claw against the lid. Biometric lock, keyed to Vorthak physiology. Vorgul placed his palm against the scanner. The lock disengaged with a hiss. Inside lay 3 objects. The first was a data crystal, archival tech, outdated by centuries. The second was a weapon, but not one of war. A ceremonial blade, its edge dulled by time, its hilt wrapped in faded leather. The third was a sphere, black, perfectly smooth. Gromnock reached for it, then froze as the sphere clicked. A hologram flickered to life above it, displaying a star map. A single system pulsed red. Vorgul leaned in. "What is this?" Coombs' voice crackled over the comb. A warning. The sphere unfolded. Metal shifted, panels sliding apart like petals, revealing a core of swirling silver energy. Gromnock's scanner shrieked. Then the world turned white. When Vorgul's vision cleared, the containment bay was in ruins. The sphere was gone. The human's frigate had not moved. And in the silence, Coombs spoke again, her voice calm. "Now that we have your attention," she said, "let's talk." Vorgul's spines flared in fury, and for the first time in his life, something colder. Section Fey. Beneath the ceremony, the silence in the containment bay was absolute. Vorgul's claws flexed against the deck, the instinctive urge to lash out warring with the cold, unfamiliar weight settling in his gut. Fear. He had known battle, had led fleets against the Crixian horde, had crushed rebellions under his armored heel. But this was different. This was control, and it was not his. The humans had not fired a single weapon. Their frigate hung in the void, unassuming, its hull scarred from old wars, but its posture relaxed. That was the worst of it. They were not braced for retaliation. They did not expect retaliation. Gromnock staggered to his feet, his scanner a ruined husk in his grip. His frill pulsed violet with agitation, his voice a hiss. That was no explosive, no known energy signature. He hesitated, mandibles clicking. It unmade our containment field, not destroyed, erased. Vorgul's gaze snapped to the blackened scorch mark where the sphere had been. The bay's reinforced plating was gone, not melted or shattered, but missing, as if something had taken a bite out of reality itself. His spines flattened against his back, and then the human commander's voice again, smooth as polished steel. High Commander Vorgul. Coombs' image flickered on the main display, her face unreadable. We came to talk. You assumed we came to surrender. Vorgul bared his fangs. You attack a Vorthak warship and expect negotiation. Coombs tilted her head. We didn't attack, we demonstrated. The screen split. A second feed appeared, an orbital view of a planet, its surface dotted with silver-purple spires. A Vorthak colony. Gromnock's breath caught. That's yours, yes. Coombs' fingers tapped something off. Screen. And now it's ours. The image zoomed in. The spires were still there, the colony intact. But nestled between them, half buried in the soil, were dozens of black spheres. Just like the one that had just unraveled a containment field like it was nothing. Vorgul's blood turned to ice. You see, Coombs continued, her voice almost conversational, we don't have your fleet, your weapons, your empire. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp, but we don't need them. We've spent our entire history surviving things that wanted us dead, ourselves. Her lips twitched, not a smile, a baring of teeth. You think you're the first to underestimate us. The feed cut, a chime, incoming transmission. Gromnock's talons trembled as he opened it. A single line of text translated into Vorthak script. Shall we talk now? Vorgul stared at the words, his mind racing. The humans had not come with gifts. They had come with a lesson, and for the first time in his life, the High Commander of the Vorthak Armada understood what it meant to be prey. The command deck of the Dread Talon was silent, not the disciplined quiet of Vorthak warriors awaiting orders, but the thick, choking stillness of predators, realizing they had stepped into a snare. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his throne, the reinforced alloy groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart thrummed in his chest, an instinctive rhythm of alarm. The humans had not just anticipated their aggression, they had prepared for it. Those black spheres, those impossible devices that had dismantled their containment fields like a blade through flesh. What else were they capable of? Across the deck, Gromnock's frills were clamped tight against his skull, his usually precise movements jerky as he analyzed the transmission. His talons flicked through holographic readouts, each new scan sending violet ripples of energy across the dark steel panels of the command console. The data made no sense. The spheres emitted no power signature, no detectable energy source. They were voids in the scans, as if the universe itself refused to acknowledge their existence. Shall we talk now? The words lingered in the air. Mocking Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He had expected groveling, bargaining, the desperate pleas of a lesser species, realizing the might arrayed against them. Instead, the humans had smiled, that unsettling baring of flat, blunt teeth, and then demonstrated, with surgical precision, that they were not the ones outmatched. A low chime echoed through the deck. Another transmission. Gromnock hesitated, his talons hovering over the console. Open it, Vorgul growled. The holoscreen flickered to life. Major Rebecca Coombs stood there again, her posture relaxed, hands clasped behind her back. The dim lighting of her ship's bridge cast sharp shadows across her face, deepening the hollows beneath her eyes. She looked amused. "Hi, Commander Vorgul," she said, her voice smooth. "I assume we have your attention." Vorgul's spine stiffened. The human did not wait for acknowledgement. She simply knew, behind her, the bridge was a stark contrast to the Dread Talon's brutalist design. Human technology lacked the harsh silver-purple glow of Vorthak systems. Instead, it hummed with muted blues and whites, the interfaces sleek, almost organic in their curvature. And yet, there was something unnerving about it. The way the crew moved with quiet efficiency, the way their eyes flicked to Coombs not in fear, but in anticipation like hunters waiting for the signal. Coombs tilted her head. "You came here expecting a weak species, a fractured people, easy to break." Her lips curled, not a smile, not quite. "But we don't break, Commander, we adapt." A flick of her fingers. The screen split, a new feed appeared, an orbital view of a human world. Not Earth, one of their colonies. The planet shifted. Gromnock hissed, his frills flaring in shock. The surface rippled, continents blurring as if seen through heat distortion. Then, in a heartbeat, the entire world vanished. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The feed cut back to Coombs. "That," she said softly, "was a test run." Vorgul's blood ran cold. The humans had not just hidden weapons in their gifts. They had hidden annihilation, and they were still smiling. The command deck of the Voidraiser had never felt so suffocating. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his command throne, the dark steel groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart pulsed erratically, a biological alarm his species had evolved for moments of existential threat. The holographic feed still burned behind his eyelids. The human colony, the impossible vanishing act. A planet erased, not destroyed, removed. Gromnock's frills remained flared, his violet, tinged skin mottled with stress pigments. The scientist's voice was a rasp, barely audible over the thrum of the ship's core. That wasn't cloaking. That wasn't illusion. The planetary mass, the gravitational signature, it's just gone. Vorgul's gaze flicked to the tactical display. The human warships hung motionless in the void, their angular silhouettes backlit by the system star. No aggressive posturing, no weapons charging. That was the most unnerving part. They didn't need to posture. The demonstration had been delivered with the casual precision of a surgeon laying down a scalpel. After a successful operation, we don't break. We adapt. Coombs' words coiled in his mind like a venomous serpent. The humans had not merely survived their violent history, they had weaponized it. Every war, every extinction event, every desperate struggle had been another forge, strike tempering them into something monstrous. A chime sounded from the comms array. The human flagship was hailing them again. Vorgul hesitated. His instincts screamed to retreat, to regroup with the Imperial fleet and burn this system to cinders from a safe distance. But the image of that disappearing world haunted him. If the humans could do that to a planet, what could they do to a fleet? He opened the channel. Coombs appeared once more, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the human crew moved with the same eerie synchronicity, their hands dancing across consoles that glowed with unfamiliar sigils. "Commander," she said, her voice calm, "I assume you have questions." Vorgul's mandibles twitched. Questions. He had terror, but pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. What was that? A containment protocol. Coombs tilted her head slightly, as if considering how much to reveal. "A failsafe, in case our negotiations turned unfavorable." Gromnock hissed. "You hid a weapon capable of planetary deletion inside a diplomatic gift." Coombs' lips curled, not a smile, a predator's baring of teeth. "We didn't hide it, scientist. We showed it to you, to raise a difference." The silence that followed was thicker than neutronium. Vorgul's mind raced. The humans had just demonstrated they could erase worlds without firing a single shot, and they had done so knowing the Vorthak Empire would see it. This wasn't just a display of power. It was a message: we are not prey. The tactical display flickered. A new alert pulsed, deep scan detected. The human ships were probing them, their sensors slicing through the Voidrazor's shielding like it wasn't even there. Gromnock's frills clamped tight to his skull. They've mapped our entire power grid. They know every weak point. Vorgul's blood ran colder. The humans had turned the tables completely. They weren't just dangerous, they were calculating. Every move, every word, every gesture was a thread in a web they had been weaving long before the Vorthak ever entered their space. Coombs leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Vorgul's. "We don't want a war, Commander, but if you force one," she gestured to the empty space where the colony had been, "well, end it." The transmission cut. The Voidrazor's bridge was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the ship's core and the ragged breathing of its crew. Vorgul stared at the void where the human flagship had been. For the first time in his life, the conqueror of 12 systems felt the icy touch of fear. The humans hadn't just survived their predators. They had become them. Section Fey, the gift that watches the silence on the Voidrazor's bridge, stretched like a blade between ribs. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his command throne, the reinforced alloy groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart thrummed at combat tempo, though there was no enemy left to fight, just the void where the human flagship had been, and the lingering weight of their words. They had known. That was the thought that coiled in his mind, venomous and inescapable. The humans had known the Vorthak would come. They had known how they would attack, and they had prepared. Gromnock's voice crackled over the comm, his usual measured tones frayed at the edges. "Commander, the artifact." Vorgul's gaze snapped to the holographic feed, the human gift, a sleek black obelisk etched with silver circuitry, still sat in the center of the Voidrazor's trophy hall, where they had placed it during the first diplomatic exchange. It had been meant as a gesture of goodwill, a cultural relic. Now it pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light, like a sleeping predator's breath. "Run a full scan," Vorgul ordered. The results came back in jagged data streams. No explosives, no radiation, no known weapon signatures, just a dense core of quantum, linked particles humming in perfect synchronization with something outside the ship. Gromnock's frills trembled. "It's not a gift. It's a beacon." Vorgul's blood turned to ice. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Major Rebecca Coombs watched the flickering holodisplay with the patience of a hunter counting heartbeats. The Vorthak scans were thorough, but they were looking for the wrong things. They expected bombs, viruses, plasma charges, tools of blunt destruction. They didn't understand human warfare. Captain Dex leaned against the tactical console, arms crossed. "Think they've figured it out yet?" Coombs didn't smile. "Doesn't matter if they have." The obelisk wasn't a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. A mirror. Every scan the Vorthak ran on it, every frequency they probed, every defensive algorithm they deployed. It fed back, not just data, but patterns, how they thought, how they reacted, where their instincts led them when threatened. And it was all streaming directly into the Iron Resolve's tactical banks. Gromnock's claws skittered across the console as he isolated the quantum link. His voice was hollow. "They're learning us." Vorgul's mandibles locked. Of course, the humans hadn't just countered their attack. They had invited it. They had let the Vorthak strike first, let them believe they held the advantage, all to see how they fought, to study them. And now the obelisk watched. "Destroy it," Vorgul snarled. The plasma torch flared to life, its violet blade hissing as it carved toward the artifact, and stopped. The obelisk's surface rippled, not with damage, but with recognition. A single line of text flickered across its face in perfect Vorthak script. too late. Then it dissolved into a cloud of nanites, swirling like smoke before the ship's vents sucked it away into the darkness. Vorgul stood motionless. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them. They had hunted them, and the hunt had only just begun. Section Fey. End word count. Fey, next section. The first rule of Predators, Section Fey. The missing frequency, the silence on the Vorthak command deck was absolute. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his throne, the reinforced alloy groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyes, 3 on each side of his wedge-shaped skull, remained fixed on the empty space where the obelisk had stood moments before. The humans had left nothing behind. No debris, no residual energy signature, just the echo of their message burned into his mind. Behind him, Gromnock's sensor array flickered erratically, its silver-purple displays stuttering as if struggling to process what had just happened. The scientist's exoskeletal plating rippled in agitation, his neural tendrils twitching as he scoured the data. "High Commander," he finally rasped, his voice modulator crackling with static. "The artifact. It wasn't just a transmitter." Vorgul didn't turn. "Explain." Gromnock's claws danced across the holographic interface, pulling up a spectral analysis. A jagged waveform pulsed in the air between them, a recording of the obelisk's final moments. "It was listening," Gromnock said. "Not just to our communications, to our systems, our shields, our weapons, even our bio-readings. It mapped everything." A low subsonic growl vibrated through Vorgul's thorax. The humans hadn't just studied their tactics. They had dissected their technology, every frequency, every weakness, laid bare before them. And now, the obelisk was gone. "Find it," Vorgul ordered. Gromnock hesitated. "It's not aboard. Scanners show no trace." "Then scan again." The command deck shuddered as the ship's primary sensors flared to life, bathing the surrounding void in pulses of violet energy. The Vorthak fleet hung in formation around them, their angular hulls gleaming like knives in the dark. Nothing moved, nothing responded, yet something was wrong. Gromnock's tendrils stiffened. "High Commander, our long-range comms." Vorgul's primary eyes narrowed. The fleet's communication network was still active. Status reports flickered across the holo, display updates from patrol ships, readiness confirmations, but something was missing. A frequency, the one reserved for emergency distress signals. "When?" Vorgul demanded. "Approximately phase cycles ago, right after the obelisk dissolved." A cold realization settled over the command deck. The humans hadn't just stolen data. They had stolen a language, and now, somewhere in the void, they were using it. Section Fey, end word count. Fey, next section. The first rule of Predators, Section Fey. The first rule of Predators, the silence of the void, was a lie. Vorgul knew this. Space was never truly empty, not for a species like the Vorthak, who had spent millennia carving their dominion from the dark. The stars whispered, the cosmic winds carried echoes of distant wars. And now, something else moved within that silence. Something that had learned to speak in their tongue. The command deck's ambient lighting pulsed a dull silver, purple, casting jagged reflections across the armored walls. Vorgul's claws flexed against the tactical console, the alloy groaning under his grip. His secondary eyes flicked across the holographic display, parsing the data streams with cold precision. No distress signals, no garbled transmissions, just the quiet, methodical erasure of their emergency channels, like a predator silencing its prey before the strike. Gromnock's tendrils coiled tight around his data scepter, his bioluminescent markings flickering in agitation. They didn't just intercept the frequency, they've replicated it, modified it. His voice was a rasp of static, the subharmonics betraying unease. "They're speaking to our systems as if they were one of us." Vorgul's mandibles twitched. Impossible. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans had infiltrated their communications, not through brute force, but through mimicry. They had taken the Vorthak's own protocols, their encryption, their authentication sequences, and turned them into weapons. A low, resonant hum filled the deck as the fleet's central AI cycled through countermeasures, its violet energy cores flaring in frustration. The human's intrusion was seamless, undetectable until it was too late. Like a blade slipping between ribs, Vorgul's primary eyes narrowed. He had faced empires that wielded planet crackers, armadas, that drowned entire systems in fire. But this was something else. This was hunting. On the human vessel Pale Horizon, Major Rebecca Coombs watched the data streams flicker across her neural interface. The Vorthak's comms were a labyrinth of nested encryptions, their language a symphony of subsonic pulses and harmonic keys. And humanity had just learned to sing along. Her fingers danced across the holopad, adjusting parameters with surgical precision. Beside her, Captain Nathan Dex leaned against the bulkhead, his cybernetic eye whirring as it parsed the incoming signals. "They're scrambling," he murmured, "trying to lock us out." Coombs didn't smile. Let them. The Pale Horizon wasn't just listening. It was learning. Every failed countermeasure, every panicked adjustment from the Vorthak fleet fed into the ship's adaptive algorithms. The more the aliens fought to reclaim their systems, the more they revealed. And the more they revealed, the easier it became to slip deeper. Dex exhaled sharply as a new data packet resolved itself, a fragment of a fleet. Wide alert, hastily encrypted. They're calling for reinforcements. Coombs' gaze didn't waver. Good. Because the first rule of predators was simple. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Back aboard the Vorthak flagship, Gromnock's tendrils jerked as a fresh wave of corrupted data flooded the network. The holographic displays flickered, their harsh silver, purple light stuttering like a dying star. There in the targeting arrays, Vorgul snarled, his armored carapace vibrating with suppressed fury. The humans weren't just eavesdropping. They were redirecting their systems, feeding false coordinates, scrambling weapon trajectories. And then, with cold inevitability, the first railgun battery misfired. A silent detonation bloomed in the void as a Vorthak frigate's own munitions tore through its flank, the explosion casting jagged shadows across the fleet. Vorgul's claws dug deeper into the console. The humans hadn't just stolen their language. They had turned it into a knife, and now they were cutting. Section, Fey, end word count. Fey, next section. The weight of silence's section, Fey. The weight of silence, the void between stars was never truly silent. Vorgul knew this. Even in the absence of sound, there was the hum of reactors, the pulse of energy conduits, the whisper of data flowing through the veins of his warship. But now, as the human counterattack unfolded, the silence was wrong. It was the silence of a predator holding its breath before the strike. His command chamber flickered with emergency lighting, the usual harsh silver. Purple glow dimmed to a bruised violet. The holographic displays, once pristine in their brutal efficiency, now stuttered like dying insects, their projections warped by the human intrusion. Gromnock's tendrils lashed in agitation as he fought to stabilize the network, his voice a low, guttural hiss. "They've nested too deep. Every purge protocol triggers another subroutine. It's adaptive." Vorgul's claws flexed. Adaptive. A polite word for alive. The humans hadn't just hacked their systems. They had infected them. Outside, the Vorthak fleet reeled. Frigates listed off course, their thrusters firing in erratic bursts as navigation matrices collapsed. A cruiser's primary weapons array spun uselessly, its targeting locked in an endless loop. Firing, recalibrating, firing again at empty space. The humans had turned their own machines against them, and the betrayal was absolute. Vorgul's secondary eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical feed. The human vessels, small, angular things that had seemed insignificant at first glance, now moved with chilling precision. They wove through the chaos, like wolves, through tall grass, their railguns spitting tungsten slugs with surgical accuracy. Each shot struck a reactor casing, a thruster nozzle, a shield emitter. Not random, not wasteful, calculated. His carapace tightened. The humans fought like they had all the time in the universe. And perhaps they did. Aboard the human flagship, Major Rebecca Coombs watched the Vorthak fleet unravel with cold satisfaction. The alien ships were beautiful in their way. All sharp angles and gleaming gunmetal, their energy signatures pulsing silver, purple like wounded stars. But beauty meant nothing in war, only efficiency, only results. Her fingers danced across the holodisplay, adjusting the parameters of their viral payload. The Vorthak had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed their language was too complex, their systems too alien for humans to comprehend. They had forgotten what humanity did best. We break things until they work for us. Captain Deck's voice crackled over the comm, his usual dry humor absent. They're trying to isolate the infection, segmenting their networks. Rebecca didn't smile. Let them. The second wave was already in place. Gromnock's mandibles clicked in frustration as another subsystem collapsed. The human's digital weapon wasn't just persistent, it was evolutionary. Every countermeasure they deployed only made it stronger. It learned, it mutated, and then, with a sudden, sickening clarity, he understood. This wasn't a virus, it was a reflection. The humans had taken the Vorthak's own code, their own logic, and turned it into something monstrous. A perfect mimic, a predator wearing their skin. Vorgul's voice cut through the chaos, deeper than the void itself. Burn it out. Full purge. Gromnock hesitated. A full purge would cripple their systems for hours, leave them blind, but the alternative was worse. His tendrils moved. Across the fleet, Vorthak ships shuddered as their neural networks self-immolated. Data cores melted down in cascading failures, the silver-purple light of their systems guttering like dying flames. For the first time in centuries, the Vorthak fleet was silent, truly silent. Vorgul stared into the black, his claws curling into fists. The humans had stolen their voice. Now, they would answer for it. The silence was worse than the screams. Vorgul stood motionless on the command deck, his armored plates locked in rigid tension. The bridge lights had dimmed to emergency crimson, casting jagged shadows across the sharp angles of Vorthak technology. The air smelled of scorched circuits and something deeper, the acrid tang of fear pheromones leaking from his crew. Their silver-purple neural displays, usually alive with the pulse of the fleet's shared consciousness, were dark. Centuries of tactical data, combat algorithms, fleet coordination, gone. Reduced to ashes in the belly of their own ships. The humans had forced their hand, and the cost was staggering. Gromnock's tendrils twitched as he monitored the flickering diagnostics. His voice, when it came, was stripped of its usual certainty. Primary systems rebooting at Fey efficiency. Secondary networks, compromised. We are blind beyond visual range. Vorgul didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the viewport, where the human vessel, indomitable, their scans had named it, drifted like a specter. Its hull was a patchwork of scars and fresh welds, a testament to battles fought and survived. No elegance, no sleek lines, just brutal adaptive functionality. And yet, it had outmaneuvered them, not with superior firepower, not with overwhelming force, with deception. The realization settled into Vorgul's bones like a toxin. The humans had weaponized their own arrogance. They had let the Vorthak see what they expected to see: chaos, desperation, and hidden the truth beneath. A trap, a perfectly laid trap. Gromnock's voice cut through his thoughts. High Commander, the human vessel is hailing us. A ripple of tension passed through the bridge. No Vorthak ship had ever received a transmission mid-battle. They were the hunters, the silent predators of the void, to be addressed. Vorgul's claws flexed. Open it. The screen flickered to life, resolving into the face of a human female. Dark skin, close, cropped hair, eyes that held no fear, only calculation. Major Rebecca Coombs. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. You burned out your own systems. That's impressive. Most species would have tried to fight the infection longer. Vorgul's mandibles tightened. You dishonor yourselves. This is not war. It is treachery. Coombs tilted her head. No, it's survival. She leaned forward, and for the first time, something flickered in her expression. Not triumph, but something colder. You came here expecting an easy conquest. You thought we were weak because we don't fight like you, because we don't think like you. A pause. Then, that was your first mistake. The transmission cut, Gromnock hissed. Their weapons, they're powering up. Vorgul's spine straightened. Shields, non-functional. We have no countermeasures. For the first time in his long, unbroken record of victories, Vorgul felt the icy touch of doubt. The humans had stolen their voice. Now, they would take their eyes. The void itself seemed to shudder as Indomitables, railguns charged, their magnetic coils humming with lethal intent. The unseen hand had finally struck. Section Fey. The trap sprung. The Indomitable did not move like a warship. It uncoiled. Vorgul's tactical display flared with warnings as the human vessel, silent, sleek, and utterly alien, shed its false lethargy. The railgun arrays along its flanks pulsed with energy, magnetic containment fields, glowing a dull, ominous red. The Vorthak had seen human weapons before, crude kinetics, inefficient plasma bursts. But this was something else. This was refinement, the kind that spoke not of desperation but of patience. Gromnock's claws scraped against the console as he parsed the data. They're projectiles. They're not solid rounds. They're fragmented. Vorgul's mandibles flexed. Explain. Each shot disperses mid-trajectory. 1,000 submunitions, each with independent guidance. Our point, defense cannot intercept them all. A cold realization settled in Vorgul's thorax. The humans had not just built a weapon. They had built a solution, a way to bypass the Vorthak's layered defenses, not through brute force, but through arithmetic. The first railgun fired. Space itself seemed to ripple as the projectile, a single dark mass, streaked toward the Vorthak flagship. Then, at the last possible moment, it fractured. A storm of tungsten needles fanned out, each one adjusting trajectory with minute thrusters, weaving through the void like a swarm of predatory insects. The flagship's shields flared once, twice, before collapsing under the sheer weight of impacts. The hull screamed as needles punched through armor, detonating in controlled bursts, shredding internal systems with surgical precision. Vorgul's ship lurched, alarms wailed. Secondary explosions in decks 7 through 12, a subordinate barked. Gromnock's frills flattened against his skull. They're targeting our power relays, not the bridge, not the engines. Just the things that let us fight back. Vorgul finished. The humans were not trying to destroy them, they were disassembling them. Aboard the indomitable Major Rebecca Coombs watched the tactical feed with detached focus. The Vorthak flagship was bleeding energy, its weapon systems flickering offline one by one. Captain Dex exhaled sharply beside her. They're not adapting. No, Coombs agreed. They're not. The Vorthak had expected a stand-up fight, a clash of shields and firepower, the kind of battle their doctrine was built for. But humanity had long since learned that wars were not won by matching strength to strength. They were won by changing the rules. A new alert chimed. Vorthak reinforcements inbound, Dex reported. 3 heavy cruisers, breaking from the edge of the system. Coombs didn't react. Activate the second package. Vorgul saw them first. The human drones, small, sleek, and utterly silent, emerged from the Indomitable's ventral bays, like spores from a dying host. They moved in perfect unison, a black tide flowing toward the Vorthak fleet. Gromnock's voice was hollow. They're not attacking. No, they were landing. The drones latched onto Vorthak hulls, their manipulators unfolding into delicate needle-like probes. Then, with terrifying precision, they began to cut. Not through armor, not through shields, through data lines. They're severing our comms, Vorgul realized, isolating us from the reinforcements. The humans had not just blinded them, they had made them alone. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Coombs finally allowed herself a small, grim smile. The Vorthak had come expecting warriors. They had found surgeons. The Vorthak fleet shuddered in the void, their silver-purple energy signatures flickering like dying stars. Commander Vorgul's claws dug into the command console, the dark steel groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyes, normally reserved for infrared tracking, pulsed with erratic violet light as the tactical display fractured into useless static. They had been severed, not just from reinforcements, from each other. The human drones had not simply cut the comms, they had dissected the Vorthak fleet's nervous system, leaving each ship a blind, twitching limb in the dark. Gromnock's voice was a rasp, his vocal membranes vibrating with something no Vorthak had ever truly felt before. Dread. They don't fight like warriors, they fight like surgeons. Vorgul's mandibles flexed in a silent snarl. He had studied human warfare, their chaotic history of fire and blood, their crude early weapons, their reckless disregard for self-preservation. He had expected them to charge, to rage, to break against the Vorthak's superior firepower like waves against a cliff. This was precision, a surgical strike, executed with the cold, methodical efficiency of a predator that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Major Rebecca Coombs watched the Vorthak fleet flounder. The drones had done their work, each one a silent, razor-edged ghost slipping between the cracks of Vorthak defenses. Their armor was thick, their shields near impenetrable, but the humans had never been interested in brute force. They had gone for the throat. Captain Nathan Dex exhaled slowly, his fingers hovering over the tactical display. There, scrambling, no comms, no coordination, just a pack of wolves with their fangs pulled. Coombs didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Vorthak had made one fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity's greatest strength was its capacity for destruction. They were wrong. It was their capacity for adaptation. Gromnock's claws trembled as he analyzed the data. The human drones had not just severed the comms, they had rewired them. The signals were still transmitting, but the messages were no longer Vorthak. They were human, a whisper in the dark. The fleet systems were rejecting their own commands, mistaking them for hostile intrusions, lockouts engaged, firewalls activated. The Vorthak ships were turning on themselves, their own security protocols betraying them. Gromnock's secondary eyes dimmed. They didn't just cut us off, they replaced us. Vorgul's spines flared in fury, but beneath the rage, something colder settled in his gut. Respect. The humans had not just outmaneuvered them, they had outthought them. The Indomitable's engines hummed, a low predatory growl as it advanced. Coombs watched the Vorthak fleet fracture, their formations collapsing into chaos. They had come expecting a war of attrition. Instead, they had gotten a lesson. Humanity had not survived by being the strongest. They had survived by being the cleverest. And now, the Vorthak would remember that forever. Section Fe. The lesson the Vorthak armada convulsed like a wounded beast, its silver-purple hulls flickering under the strain of their own security protocols. Firewalls, designed to repel external threats, now turned inward, locking out command sequences, severing weapon feeds, sealing bulkheads between decks. The fleet's neural network, once a seamless extension of Vorgul's, had become a labyrinth of betrayal. Gromnock's claws trembled over his console, his secondary eyes pulsing in frantic denial. The data streams were no longer theirs. Human algorithms slithered through the command matrix, rewriting access codes, impersonating Vorthak authority signatures with chilling precision. Every countermeasure the Vorthak deployed only accelerated the collapse. Their own systems recognized them as intruders. They didn't just cut us off, Gromnak rasped, his voice hollow. They replaced us. Vorgul stood motionless on the command platform, his spines rigid with fury. But beneath the rage, something colder took root. Respect. The humans had not merely outmaneuvered them with brute force. They had infected their logic, turned their own doctrines against them. The Vorthak had waged war for centuries under one unshakable truth. Strength dictated survival. Yet here, in the void between stars, humanity had proven there was another law. Prevail, the indomitable glided forward, its armored flanks scarred but unbroken. Major Rebecca Coombs watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the Vorthak fleet devoured itself. Their formations splintered, ships drifting helplessly as their thrusters misfired, their weapons deactivated by their own paranoid safeguards. A few vessels attempted manual overrides, only to find human countermeasures had already rewritten their backup systems. Captain Nathan Dex exhaled sharply beside her. They came for a war of attrition. Coombs' lips curled, and we gave them a seminar. The Vorthak had expected humanity to fight like any other species, to meet their overwhelming force with desperate, straightforward resistance. Instead, the humans had hacked the very concept of war. They hadn't just defeated the Vorthak fleet. They had reprogrammed their understanding of defeat. On the Vorthak flagship, Vorgul finally moved. He activated a direct channel, raw, unencrypted, stripped of all but the most primitive transmission protocols. No AI intermediaries, no network systems to corrupt, just his voice and the silence of space. The Indomitable's bridge speakers crackled to life. Human Commander. Vorgul's voice was a blade dragged across stone. You have taught us something. Coombs exchanged a glance with Dex. She opened the reply channel. And what's that? A pause. Then, grudging, almost reverent, that we were fools to think you weak. The admission hung in the air like a surrender. Across the battlefield, the Vorthak ships powered down, weapons disengaged, shields collapsed, not because they were broken, but because they chose to. Humanity had not survived by being the strongest. They had survived by being the cleverest, and now the Vorthak would remember that forever. Aftermath of reverence, the silence that followed was not the quiet of defeat, but of recalibration. Across the Vorthak fleet, systems hummed in standby, their harsh silver, purple energy cores dimmed to a muted glow. The Indomitable's own weapons remained primed, not out of paranoia, but protocol. Yet even the most hardened human gunners found their fingers easing off triggers as the reality settled in. Vorgul's flagship, the Eternal Fang, drifted closer, its jagged hull scarred from battle, but still imposing. A single docking umbilical extended, an archaic gesture, one that predated even the Vorthak's dominance. No shields, no escort drones, just an invitation. Coombs exhaled, her breath fogging the visor of her helmet for a brief moment before the suit systems whisked it away. Dex, she said, you're with me. The Marine didn't argue. He simply checked his sidearm, not because he expected treachery, but because centuries of human history had engraved the lesson deep: hope for peace, prepare for war. The air aboard the Eternal Fang was thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic, like blood left to dry on heated steel. The corridors were narrower than human designs, the walls lined with recessed weapon mounts and tactical displays flickering in violet glyphs. Vorthak warriors stood at attention, their armored forms rigid, but their weapon arms were folded in a gesture the indomitable xenolinguists flagged as ritual deference. Vorgul awaited them in a chamber, devoid of holograms or AI interfaces, just a slab of dark alloy and a single view screen showing the wreckage of the battle. Beyond his massive frame was motionless, but his primary eyes tracked Coombs with an intensity that would have been predatory hours ago. Now it was assessing. "Your species," he began. The words slow, as if dragged from some deep place, "does not fight like prey. You fight like the void itself. Patient, absolute, unforgiving." Coombs tilted her head. "We fight to survive." A ripple passed through the Vorthak's armored plating, their version of a laugh perhaps, or a sigh. "No, you fight to teach." He turned to the view screen, where the indomitable loomed like a specter. "And we have learned." 3 solar cycles later, the first Vorthak delegation arrived on Mars, not as conquerors, as students.